PC VR versus mobile VR. Can you really even call it much of a versus when the most popular PC VR headset is a mobile headset? I mean, come on, that should say just about everything that has to be said, right? Obviously not. Come on, there's a whole lot more to the situation than can be reduced down by such a simple comparison. There are differences though, and knowing what those differences are can play a very big role in assisting you in making the best decision to fit your needs. With that in mind, let's go ahead and get this comparison video underway. To start this discussion, let's go ahead and define what I mean when I say PC VR and standalone VR, since depending on what you're looking at, it can be very nebulous. I mean, come on, we've got headsets like the Oculus Quest that can basically be both depending on how you use it. For the sake of this video, PC VR will refer to using a standalone computing unit to drive images to your VR headset, whereas mobile VR will really more be referring to the standalone type VR, whereby the computing unit is housed inside of the VR headset itself. Not to be confused with the past definition of mobile VR, which would basically be the kind of smartphone, Google Cardboard stuff that's basically more or less died at this stage. Got it? Then let's go ahead and get this discussion started with the most obvious difference between the two form factors.
Power.
Yeah, there's no real way to sugarcoat this. The PC just utterly dominates the standalone form factor in regards to power, basically in every single way. When you consider that the Snapdragon XR2 that powers most of today's standalone VR headsets isn't powerful enough to even compare to the base PlayStation 4, which was already somewhat underpowered back in 2013, it becomes very apparent that there's no real way to get a comparison going between the amount of power that's available to PC VR headsets versus what you get in a standalone unit. Especially when you consider that a lot of standalone units are getting better specs, which conversely means that a lot of that power has to be used to drive the image quality at the expense of the actual visual eye candy on display. You can run a PS2 game at 4K 90 frames per second, but it's still going to feel like a PS2 game. By comparison, PC VR is literal generations ahead of it in visual quality. So it suffices to say that if you care about visual eye candy, you're gonna want to go with PC VR. Of course, graphics aren't everything. And when it comes to gameplay, PC VR versus mobile VR is a little bit more of a nebulous situation, because it can really depend on what you're looking for here. Options-wise, PC VR has standalone VR just completely and utterly beat. While you can get a lot of the same experiences nowadays because the developers are starting to port things down, there are just things that aren't quite the same on the portable side of things as they are on the PC VR side of things. Just look at the full-fat VR chat experience, doing game dev stuff using Unreal Engine, or trying to do VTubing using Virtual Cast. It's just not the same experience, and honestly, you're pretty much gonna have to go with PC VR if you want to experience the full breadth of what VR software allows. Now, of course, mobile VR software is getting better, and I do expect that there will be a time where there'll be sophisticated things you just can't do on PC VR without getting like some very portable PC or some kind of really special unit, just due to the simplicity and the portability of the standalone VR form factor. But that time isn't today, and in today, if you want to have the most experiences you possibly can in VR, you're going to want a PC VR unit. That kind of ties a little bit into the final point of comparison I want to bring up in this situation: the price. This is an area where standalone VR really changed the game. In the past, when I showed people VR, it would be a whole process of going, okay, you're gonna need a computer, you're gonna need the VR headset, you're gonna need the controllers, you're gonna need to set up these stations everywhere, you're gonna have to go through this process. That was a whole thing that PC VR had to go through in order to get somebody in, and it could easily cost well over $1,000. By comparison now, all I had to do to get a friend to get into VR was just point them to a $299 Oculus Quest, and boom. They were in VR and they loved it. Now, of course, if you already have a gaming PC, the discussion can be a little bit trickier because now it's a question of whether you want to pick up a headset that's way more dedicated for PC VR, or whether or not you want to pick up a mobile headset that can be used for PC VR, a la the Oculus Quest. Ultimately, even in those situations, you're now going to end up having to pick whether or not you want to buy the software on the PC VR side or on the mobile VR side. And really, when you have that option, it's pretty easy to lean on the side that best suits what you want to do on a regular basis. So if you want the best graphics, you're probably going to lean towards buying things on your graphically powerful PC versus wanting to do so on like the standalone platform where the convenience is king. Ultimately though, by the time that you're kind of really weighing out whether or not you want to buy a really expensive PC VR headset or a cheap one, it pretty much just says that price isn't as big of a factor for you. And if you have a PC that's capable of running the kind of high-end headset that you would get on the high-end side of PC VR, it pretty much says that cost isn't that tight for you, as is compared to maybe somebody who's struggling to save up for an Oculus Quest 2. Going off of the comparisons we've made, it would be very easy to think that PC VR is absolutely crushing it. I mean, come on, PC VR pretty much creamed standalone VR when it came to the power category. The gameplay one was another pretty solid win, I'd say. And when it comes to price, by the time you have that kind of comparison to make, it pretty much means that you're probably able to go with either one. So why is it that this comparison seemed to be so heavily skewed towards standalone VR at the very beginning of this video? Well, it's obviously because the market and the reality of the industry has clearly shown that the strengths that PC VR has aren't enough to make up for that third category of price and convenience. Seeing as we're all kind of on the same page on the technical layout of things, let's go ahead and dive into the segment where we touch on how things are playing out in reality. Despite the gargantuan power difference that exists between the standalone and PC VR side of things, what we're seeing is that people are generally just leaning towards going towards the standalone solution because it ends up being a lot cheaper and a lot more accessible to them as is compared to the PC VR experience. This year in particular has been awful to try to get into the PC VR side of things, because if you don't already have a PC capable of running VR, you're pretty much going to struggle to get one at this point, because graphics cards alone cost more than the cost of a whole standalone VR unit. It really is kind of crazy, and while I don't expect things to stay this way forever, at the same time, I'm not really expecting there to be a day where just going to the store and buying an Oculus Quest or some standalone unit won't be simpler, cheaper, and more convenient than having to go and build your own PC or shop around for the right gaming PC capable of running VR. On the note of convenience and simplicity, I know that a lot of the PC guys are gonna hate me saying this, but it really is just a lot more quick and easy to have a simple, cohesive ecosystem where everything is put into place for you, rather than having all the customization options that you get with the PC system. That customization is great because it gives you all the opportunities to really tailor your experience to what you want. But in the face of just being able to say, put on an Oculus Quest and start playing Beat Saber, versus having to put on your Oculus Quest, put it into the PC via either AirLink or the link cable, then have the Oculus and or Steam VR software load up, then going on to click the Beat Saber icon. It really can be those extra 2 or 3 little steps that can make somebody decide whether or not they're gonna go ahead and connect up to their PC VR situation versus just enjoying a quick mobile one. And when you can demonstrate that quick mobile one at any time just by bringing the headset around with you and setting it up wherever you want, it really does make the whole setting up base stations, getting your PC system ready, setting up all that software experience just seem like a huge hassle. For a lot of people, that convenience factor, it really can overwhelm whatever benefit and gameplay advantages there can be on the PC VR side of things, whether or not that's having a better tracking solution or it's having a much better and more sophisticated setup, like having an omnidirectional treadmill, wheel, cockpit, or anything like that. In the face of convenience, a lot of stuff nowadays really does just get by the wayside, much as it kills me to have to admit that. And while I really wish things were different, I cannot possibly emphasize that enough. I'm on the whole side of wanting to see sophisticated VR hardware everywhere. The market just doesn't look like it's heading in that direction. Popularity-wise, the more cheap, low-end headset that is the Oculus Quest seems to be utterly dominating things, having the majority of both the standalone market as well as the PC VR market, if the Steam hardware surveys are anything to go by. That's pretty crazy dominance for just one headset that hasn't even been out for a year yet. And when you consider as well that a lot of the PC VR side of things has been struggling, it doesn't really help matters. HTC used to be one of the biggest players on the market, and yet they've been completely floundering over the past few years. Valve is definitely making some pretty good steps, but the availability of their headset and the price does put it out of the reach for a lot of people, on top of just all the other new crazy nice headsets that are releasing, just being outside of people's price ranges and being geared more towards the enterprise sector as well. When you've got that kind of a concentration in the super high end of things, that's literally a recipe for going niche. And aside from maybe a PSVR 2, I'm not really seeing much being done to try to cater towards that mid-level / casual console gamer type demographic on the PC VR side of things, which is a shame because that basically just means that somebody who might have wanted to go for like a mid-level headset is probably just going to lean towards going towards the cheaper side of things since it's a much smaller commitment. When you look at the situation as it is right now, it kind of makes sense why it is that articles are being written saying that PC VR is dead rather than saying that VR is dead. It's a lot harder to look at something like the Quest 2 and say that things are dying rather than it is to look at the PC VR side of things where there are literally companies getting out of the market and or switching up their entire business models in order to compensate. That's basically an admission on the press side of things that PC VR versus mobile VR is like comparing a flourishing person to a corpse. Not really much of a comparison now, is it? Then again, PC and VR have been corpses enough times in history that I'm starting to wonder how many times something can die before you start questioning whether or not it's been killed in the first place. I mean, come on, at some point somebody's gotta start to learn the difference between an afternoon nap and a dirt nap, right? We have to understand, this isn't a zero-sum game. Standalone VR being great doesn't mean PC VR has to die, and vice versa. They can both coexist, and if anything, they are both better for it. If anything, the fact that we have material to make a comparison about in the first place like we've done is a good thing in that of itself. For starters, the whole power comparison thing we were doing can really more simply be summarized as which part of the spectrum do you lie on in regards to your ability and budget with regards to graphical power. There really is something for everybody at this point. If you don't have anything in regards to gaming hardware, you can just pick up an Oculus Quest 2 and be right on your way. If you already have a baller gaming PC, all you've got to do is pick out what kind of headset you want to go along with it, and you're pretty much set. And hey, if you end up wanting more casual experiences at some point or something for on the go, you can just pick up another standalone headset and it won't be that much crazier in comparison. Options are amazing, people, and the fact that we have options at each power bracket is wonderful. Speaking of options, while paralysis of analysis can be a little bit of an issue when it comes to deciding what kind of a headset you want, at the very least in the near future, I'm expecting things to be a little bit more clear-cut on the gameplay side of things, since there are things that are just going to be much easier to do with one type of headset over the other. In the future, standalone is probably going to start gearing more towards the AR side of things, where you start converting your house and environment into a much more game-level thing, versus the current setup where we're just trying to adapt small spaces that are more or less of a square shape into a play space. In comparison, PC VR I feel is just going to kind of lean more into the really hardcore, in-depth, sophisticated experiences, as well as the more productive side of things, just to kind of take advantage of all that hardware power that it has available to it. There will be ways to kind of bridge these gaps, of course, if you really do want to kind of go through with it. I mean, like I've mentioned, the Oculus Quest / standalone VR headset archetype is more than capable of being hooked up to a PC, and likewise, the PC can technically be shrunken down and made portable in the future. I mean, look at Valve's Steam Deck as a new option in that regard. I'm really looking forward to seeing what people will do with that as soon as that hardware becomes available. I mean, Valve themselves specifically said that this just hasn't been possible in a way they liked it in the past, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what that kind of hasn't been possible in the past can mean for the future of virtual reality. Ultimately, the only real debate that you gotta have on a gameplay side of things is just how you're really expecting to play a game in the future. Me personally, I tend to lean on the more casual side of things because I have a full-time job, and I don't always have a long extended period of time to be able to play games. So being able to just quickly put on my headset and play something is much more valuable to me than having a long session to enjoy something. By comparison, if you're somebody who's maybe retired, in high school or in college or between jobs, you might want to value having a little bit more extended experiences and higher quality experiences in that time. So in that case, going for the more PC VR copies of things will probably be more towards your benefit. Just go with what works for your situation. That's really all that we can look for here. Really, I think the story that's coming out of this whole conversation the most is that these platforms, standalone, PC, VR, they're really a whole lot more similar and united than they are different and divided. The only part of the market that's really kind of estranged at this point is the PlayStation VR kind of software segment that they cut out for themselves on the PS4. And even then, I'm kind of hoping for that to slowly and steadily open up with the PSVR 2 and Sony's slow and steady transition to being much more PC friendly by releasing some of their first party titles onto the platform. This whole conversation started out as a comparison between PC and mobile VR, and I do want to acknowledge that there are some valid comparisons to be made and some things to consider. If you really want to have like high-end software experiences, you want to have the best visuals, you want to do maybe productive stuff like maybe VTubing or game development, then it's pretty obvious you're gonna want a PC for that kind of stuff anyway. But if you're really more just looking to casually enjoy virtual reality, to maybe be able to get away from the world here and there just for brief bits at a time, and you want to have something that you can bring with you and maybe share with others, then having a standalone device is clearly a much better option for you. But at the end of the day, these things aren't working against each other. If anything, they're working to support each other. Both of these experiences are valid and amazing, and depending on how you want to enjoy it, they can both be readily accessible to you. After all you need is a gaming PC and an Oculus Quest to really get started on enjoying the benefits of both of these platforms. I'm positive quite a few people are going to end up clicking on this video expecting me to take a singular side on this whole matter, saying that PC VR is the absolute best, it gives you all the power in the world, and we need to use that power to expand the horizons of the VR market, forget the standalone stuff because it's too weak and it doesn't let us do everything we want. Or you were expecting me to take the standalone side and say the PC VR side is too elitist and too exclusive, we have to slowly and steadily go just onto the standalone stuff and build up from there. But personally, I just think that we aren't in a position where we can be really making comparisons and fighting between one another in this manner. I want to see the day when both forms of virtual reality have reached their full potential, whether that's standalone VR turning into this AR, VR hybrid type stuff where we get to enjoy ordinal scale type experiences, or whether or not that's PC VR becoming the Ready Player One Sword Art Online stuff that we're all dreaming about. We need to see virtual reality as a whole prosper to see that come to pass. I'd say we should probably save trying to unalive one another for when the press and the world around VR stops trying to do that for us. Until that time comes, I'm going to be a supporter of PC VR with mobile VR rather than versus. Thank you very much for watching this video, everyone. To anyone who wants to discuss virtual reality and enjoy more conversations with like-minded people on the subject, go ahead and check out the Discord server I have linked down below in the description. Till next time, my fellow adventurers and dreamers, this has been Gregory, logging out.